Okay, thank you. Call the meeting to order. It's 9:31 on the clock. Before we get going, I'd like to start by acknowledging it's Administrative Professional Day today. So with that, thank you to all of our admin team and all the work that you guys do for the organization. We definitely couldn't do what we do without you, so thank you very much. With that, move to the adoption of the agenda. Anything else from council? Councillor Dean?
I had sent an email out asking to have council have a look at a dust control situation for a resident on the way to Hardwick. Spoke to Andre yesterday. He suggests that perhaps we could just include it in our budget discussion. But I leave it up to you as how you'd like to handle it.
Yeah, I talked with Andre this morning too. He said it'll definitely come up with our budget. We'll talk the numbers. So.
That's fine then. Yeah.
Okay. Anything from administration?
Your Worship, just want to point out two additions to the agenda. Item 9.5, Airport Development Process and Guidelines. And addition to the closed meeting, item 12.2, Inter-Municipal Collaboration. And deletion of 12.1, Municipal Communications.
So 12.1 becomes ICF?
Yes.
Interim ICF.
And that's still in closed session?
12 point, the intermunicipal collaboration is in closed session. Yes.
Okay, anything else? Seeing none, can I get a motion to accept the agenda as amended? Councillor Wilhelm.
I'll motion to accept the agenda as amended.
Thank you very much. Motion on the floor. Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Just making sure we get no councillors online there. Doesn't look like we have councillors sitting there. Adoption of the minutes. Council meeting for April 15th, 2024. Any corrections, additions? Anybody see anything there? Councillor Dean?
I move that we accept the minutes from the April 15th meeting as presented.
With that motion on the floor, call the question. All in favor? That's carried. We're just about to 9:35 there. We do have a delegation from the Whitecourt Minor Ball. You want to move right into that there, Heather?
Have a seat. Good morning, Reuben Council. Your delegation this morning is Whitecourt Minor Ball Association. We have Cam Walt and Chelsea Rosewell. I'm trying to say it right. Your presentation was sent into your package yesterday, and they're just going to go over their Whitecourt Minor Ball Association.
Hey, thank you very much for coming. I'll start with just go around the table so you know who we got here. You want to start there, Joan?
Joan Slutwig, Community Services Director.
Alan Dean, Whitecourt Central.
Jeremy Wilhelm, Whitecourt East.
David Cush, and Reeve and Councillor for Anselmo.
John Burrows, Councillor for Whitecourt West.
Devin Williams, Councillor for Fortis and Whitenu.
Carrie Stevens, Executive Assistant.
Andre Bouchan, Director of Infrastructure and Acting CF.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. My name is Chelsea Rosewell. I've been involved in Whitecourt Minor Baseball since my oldest son was 9 years ago. I started with sponsorship, then treasurer, and now president. I also have sat on the Whitecourt Slow Pitch Association board for multiple years. We requested this presentation with County Council to bring to your attention the growth we are seeing with our organization and how it is impacting county residents. We also have been having a difficult time over the years with the town of Whitecourt and their lack of interest in helping maintain and upkeep the ball diamonds. I brought a copy of the letter we sent to the town of the list of maintenance requests last August before the budget meeting. I am aware that some of the items on the list are not the concern of council and some are, but I will just read the list in its entirety. I didn't send the list, but I have it here. The town maintenance list for the 2024 season that we requested were that the diamonds would be weeded on the shale and sprayed in the spring before the ball season. Normally they spray them in the fall. The grass needs to be mowed, whippersnipped weekly. The town has said that they will mow weekly and whippersnip every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on availability of personnel. We've asked them to fix the holes in the fences. They've agreed that they will fix the holes that they see fit of being a safety concern. And they will reskin one of our diamonds hopefully next year. We asked that they would get rid of the ants on the back diamonds along the trees. We have 2 rally cap diamonds back there for the little guys, and they're completely infested with ants. They have said that they're going to try a stronger pesticide this year to see if that works, but recommended that we use diamonds 7 and 8 for this year. Diamond 2, we would like to see upgraded to shale. They have said that this is a capital cost, and we need to apply for a provincial grant. We would like to get water lines down to the center of the diamonds, whether that be the concession, so it's out of the way, doesn't matter to us, just down there to maintain the diamonds is what the water is for. They also have said, no, put it in your provincial grant. We've requested a town worker come to each tournament to drag the diamonds and upkeep the washrooms. In the past, we've had to get restaurants to donate toilet paper, paper towel, because we always run out over the weekend of hosting, and they never come and empty the garbages. So we tried putting the garbages in the batting cage to keep it away from the birds. They just dug a hole under the batting cage and picked it all apart anyway. They have agreed to bring a dumpster down for our host weekends, so we need to call them on the Monday before. They'll drop it off on the Friday and they'll pick it up on the following Monday, which was great. Then we addressed a 5-year plan with them. We would like to see the football field get moved to St. Joe's, and the rally cap diamonds that are back along the trees be moved up closer to the parking lot. We would like to have each division have their own diamond, 18, 15, 13, and 11. And we would like these diamonds to be interchangeable for each age group if we could. We need some ramps for Diamond 3 for wheelchair access. I believe that we're making those now.
Yeah, and we're, well, in consultation with the town, because it doesn't really need a physical ramp, just needs the earth
Right.
and gravel there brought up to the same level as the dugout.
Yeah.
So it's a minor fix, but still has to be done.
We've also requested that gates be put on our Challenger diamond, which is our Diamond 3, the one that we got from Jay's Care upgraded last year. That is our diamond for our special needs players, and we requested that we have a gate on the outside of each of the dugouts to keep the diamond enclosed and more safe. The
reason for that is some of the handicapped kids, they want to run, and you only have so many assistants there to watch them, and they could be off in another diamond if we don't keep them contained.
Yeah, enclosed, yeah.
So it's kind of pertinent to them, only them, none of the other teams, but just for them too. So we know where they're all at to keep a handle on them.
Yep. And I believe that we put that in our grant for our enhancement grant to the town this year. And they're currently reviewing that. We requested ball dispensers at the backstop. Cam has built them and installed them already. We requested another shed for storing equipment. We are running out of space down there. We requested a concrete path from the parking lot to the diamond, again for our wheelchair access. They told us to put that in the provincial grant as well. And we also would like to develop the campground back there, as we think that it could be utilized for ourselves, slow pitch, golf, and soccer. I don't know if they really have any tournaments, but and they have said that golf is currently looking at upgrading and installing a campground down there. So that's sort of in the works, but I would say,
Yeah, no communication yet
yeah,
in regards.
haven't really heard anything. So that's the list in its entirety and most of their responses. The maintenance items we have struggled with for years trying to get accomplished by the town. For the first time, we had a meeting with the town to discuss, and that's the responses that I read to you as well. Now that I've given you the backstory of our organization, I'd like to take this opportunity to illustrate the growth we've had in our association over the past few years. I brought a spreadsheet of our registration numbers from 2021 to 2023. I believe you all have it. I revamped it to include the county percentage numbers, which we didn't have before. So from our registration numbers from 2021, we had a 39% increase from 21 to 22, and a 22% increase from 22 to 23, and 23 seeing us back to our full numbers like we were before COVID. I also have the numbers for 2024, which I didn't have before, but we've seen a 12.75% increase from 2023 to 2024. So we are still growing. If we get the increase in players, wrong spot. This year we are hoping for another increase in adding an all-girls softball division as well as an adult challenger division. With all this growth, I'm hoping the town of Whitecourt and Woodlands County will see a benefit in upgrading our facility. With the addition to an all-girls softball division, we will require a softball diamond. We have ended up with 38 girls for softball, creating 3 13U teams for this year. I'm hoping we will continue to see growth each year in all divisions of our association. If that is the case, we will need 2 diamonds for sure, but 3 would be ideal. If we get the increase in players we're hoping for in the years to come, we will see all 4 diamonds used by 2 different teams per night. It would be ideal if the 4 diamonds we have were appropriate for each of the age groups, like I listed in the maintenance list. We would also like to see the rally cap diamonds moved up to the front. It doesn't make sense to have the smallest ones the furthest away from the facility and washrooms. Not to mention all the diamonds are completely overran by red ants. Another illustration I would like to bring to county's attention is our host weekends. Last season, all 4 of our AA teams had host weekends for their divisions, and Whitecourt Minor Ball hosted 1 tournament. I broke the spreadsheet into days as the 11Us hosted on weeknights. Throughout the entire season, we brought 27 teams from out of town to Whitecourt. I averaged 12 players per team and 2 family members per player for an estimated total of 4,392 people brought to Whitecourt over the months of May to August. That is 4,392 people coming to our town, hoteling, camping, eating, shopping, and enjoying our facility. This year, we are hoping to host 2 tournaments for Whitecourt Minor Ball, and the AA teams have a potential of 10 host weekends between all the different age groups, bringing more people from out of town to our facility and community. Last year, I received countless compliments on our facility from out-of-towners. Overall, in coming here today, we wanted to show the council that we do bring a benefit to the community and are continuing to try to grow our association. I'm hoping we can continue to work together on making Whitecourt's facility the best one around. Thank you all very much for your time. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Wilhelm?
The chair to Chelsea. When was the last time you guys had the meeting with Town of Whitecourt?
March.
This year?
End of March.
March. It was supposed to be February 29th, but it got pushed.
Yeah.
And it
Several
was in
times.
March. Yeah.
Okay. Have you guys ever requested to speak directly to the Community Services Committee instead of the council as a whole?
No, but we did discuss with Chelsea at the meeting that we had with the administration about community services and their, I guess she just had mentioned how we should do a presentation to them as well and discuss with them the upgrades that we need and maybe changing our rental agreement.
Yeah, so I sit on that Community Services Board as well. I think it's a very good idea for you guys to present to them more specifically than council as a whole. I think you'll get a lot more traction in that manner. And then also come in with a very clear plan, what you're gonna put in your grant application, and then what your ask is maybe from the town or the county as well on top of those grant applications for the projects that you wanna have. I think that would be a great path forward for you guys.
Okay.
Just before I get you there, just to administration, given that we have kids from the county, we don't just have kids in baseball here in Whitecourt. We have Fort Assiniboine, we have in Selmo, we have Marythorpe. Are there any community grants or what that the county has specifically that they could possibly apply for, or when that would help with some of these shortfalls that they have? But we got to make sure that whatever we're doing is, on an even playing field for all the fields across the municipality.
Through to the Reef, we have the recreation grant, and actually the Whitecourt Minor Ball Association has applied for that grant that goes to the Community Services Committee tomorrow for approval or review. We have had in the past, Fort Assiniboine and I believe Anselmo have applied in the past, they just haven't recently. But that the recreation grant is available for those groups to apply for that support.
Councillor Dean?
That's through the chair to Chelsea, and sorry, I forgot your first name. Cam. Kudos to you guys for, the volunteer hours that you put in, the kids benefit and the numbers you talk about in terms of visitors coming, the community benefits as well. So thank you for your volunteers' time. Some of the items that the town referred to an Alberta grant, did they speak to you about assistance in writing that grant? I know they have people there that help, and I mean, we also have people that can help. And did you guys have that conversation at all?
Yes, we did. Chelsea did say that if we wanted to apply for that grant, that they would help us
Okay.
and give us any guidance.
They have the online assistance as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I guess what I'm thinking is that it'd be nice if the funds that you guys require could come in immediately, but that if you are successful in those grants, then that's going to be a big benefit to everybody. So
Usually they're a year ahead or a year behind, right? You apply this year and then get it next year kind of thing.
exactly, yeah.
And we didn't have, there wasn't much applied for last year, if anything.
Sure.
So this year we're kind of falling short. And usually the end of the season we're running the negative just a little bit. So with that, you have to up, if you want to do any improvements, you have to up your registration costs.
Yeah.
And that might put it out of reach for some kids and some families, especially with today's economic situation that all Canadians are in. And so we're trying to keep that as low as possible so that as many kids can play as possible.
Yeah, and I look at the ratios that you show here of the percentage of county participants, and they're actually above the ratio of the population that we use for calculating various things. So that's something noteworthy as well.
It seems like most of the help comes from the county though, like county members that, residents anyway. She's from the county, I'm from the county.
And just to build on what Councillor Dean is saying, there are sport grants through Woodlands County as well for any Woodlands residents to participate in the
We
association.
have had, I don't know specifically about county kids registering, but we did have a couple town kids register for grants to play and received the grant.
Anything else from council? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Hopefully administration can help you guys with some of the grants and stuff you're looking for. I know Heather is a really big supporter of community groups, so if there's anybody who will help point you in the right direction or help you out here, it's definitely gonna be her.
Okay,
Thank
thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
With that, can I get a motion from council? Councilor Williams?
I'll make a motion that council accepts the Whitecourt Minor Ball Association presentation as information.
Thank you very much. Motion on the floor, call the question, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you again for your presentation and your time. We'll move down to our next presentation from the Metrix Group. Good morning, Lan.
Good morning, Reeve and Council. Today, I would like to bring forward an RFD for the presentations of the audit financial statement for the fiscal year end 2023. The audit financial statement is required to be performed by an independent audit firm Metrix was appointed and has been our auditors since 2022 on a 3-year term. This year, Metrix started the interim audit remotely around mid-December 2023. And the team came on site to meet the staff and did further audit for the week of April 3rd to the 5th. They had wrapped up their work on April 22nd. And with that, I would like to turn over to Jeff Allison from Metrix for his presentation today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, thanks for having me here today to discuss the 2023 financial statements for Woodlands County. So with that said, I usually begin these presentations, I like to give an overview of an audit, so really the importance of it and why we have it. And it's really to enhance the degree of confidence of those intended users of the financial statements, which the main users being yourselves as councilors, ratepayers, municipal affairs, so those organizations or individuals with a vested interest in the financial performance of Woodlands County. This is achieved by us as auditors expressing an opinion. So what that means is that we are going to give assurance that the financial statements are free from a material misstatement. So what that means is that we're seeking reasonable assurance, so it's a high level of assurance, but it's not absolute, so we do not audit every transaction that happened during the year. Also, as auditors, we exercise professional judgment, maintain professional skepticism, so questioning mind, stay alert to conditions which may indicate possible misstatement. So areas such as cutoff, we want to make sure that transactions have been recorded in the correct fiscal period. Revenue recognition, that revenue is being recognized once services have been rendered or performance obligations have been met. And then as well as collectability of accounts receivable. So are those receivables deemed to be collectible? Should there be an allowance associated with anything? And then also on top of that, a critical assessment of the audit evidence. So is the evidence we're obtaining directly from a third party to confirm? Is it internally provided? Has anything been altered? So those are just some areas there in relation to skepticism. When it comes to our independent auditor's report, so page 3 and 4 of your financial statements, at the top we give our opinion that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position, results of operations in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So those are the accounting standards that all government organizations report under across Canada. When it comes to the basis for opinion, we indicate here that we conducted our audit in accordance with Canadian generally accepted auditing standards. The responsibility of management, those charged with governance for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. And then the last part of the audit report summarizes the auditor's responsibility for the audit, which in turn indicates our objective, which is to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatements. When it comes to your financial highlights for the year, so this is a snapshot of where the county was at as at December 31, 2023. You'll see your cash position was up just over $6 million. So the county had generated about $9.8 million from its operating activities during the year. You also received an additional $3.5 million in relation to new debentures, and then as well spent $6.3 million on tangible capital asset additions. So that resulted in the various change in your cash year over year. When it comes to taxes and grants in place of taxes, your current taxes were down about $540,000. You had a larger taxpayer pay their balance year over year, so you saw a decrease from 766 to 1.3. And then when it comes to your arrears and your allowance, there was a write-off in the year of 1.1 million, so that in turn reduced both those amounts there as the amount came out of the allowance and then adjusted through the arrears there. So that left you with a total of 733,000 in taxes owing versus 1 million in the prior year. When it comes to other receivables, trade and accounts receivable of 1.1 million, receivable from other governments, mainly made up of disaster recovery funding there of 1.3. Goods and services tax was up to 113 from 68, as you had two months in there, November, December. Prior year just had December, so that's why you see the bump there. Small allowance here for 39,000 left you with 2.5 million or $260,000 increase in your receivable balance there. Back to the statement of financial position, your final receivable here, loans receivable. So you had principal repayment in the year of 180,000 on those loans, which left you with a total financial asset position of 31 million or a $6 million increase from prior year's 25. When it comes to liabilities, so what the county still owes subsequent to year end, accounts payable and accrued liabilities. Payables to other government of 5.8 million, trade payables of $1 million, wages of 300, so that makes up the balance there of 7.1. Deposit liabilities were down to 170,000, and then your employee benefit obligation of 385,000, which is made up of vacation pay of 300, sick accrual there of 52,000, and as well as overtime of 30. Deferred revenue, 138,000. This represents grant funding that the county has received, but is not yet applied to a project. So you started the year at 668. You received your MSI funding for 2023 of 845, as well as various other grants of 122. You then spent the MSI money on salt and sand storage shed, as well as gravel crushing and storage as well. So that's where that money went. And then you're still left with the other deferred amounts in relation to the Fund Outfitters Development project there left you with 138,000 still to be recognized in relation to funding for that. Back to your statement of financial position, new line item for the year is your asset retirement obligation, $8 million. So the new adoption of public sector standard 3280, municipalities or local governments for the year were required to adopt asset retirement obligation. So management and their team went through your tangible capital asset listing, identified items that potentially could have an asset retirement obligation associated. Work was then done on those items to come up with a costing estimate of what it would be in the future to settle those assets. That was then present valued back to today's date for a total cost of $8 million, which is booked on your financial statement. So this includes lagoons, gravel pits, you have some plants, lift stations, as well as water wells. So anything that has an additional environmental cost in order to retire that asset in the future. So it's not that these liabilities didn't exist previously, they just were not reflected on your financial statements with no accounting standard for that. Now they are. So as these items in the future, say a lagoon, 50, 60 years out, or gravel pit gets reclaimed in the future, the cost associated with that environmental impact is here as a liability. So it allows you to make decisions going forward. In essence, what do we need based on current estimates in order to have the funds available to meet that environmental obligation there. So again, it's based on a present value technique. So currently it's at 8 million. Your undiscounted cash flows is at 11 million. So what you're working towards in the future, and then items to be settled between 2024 and 2062 based on the current estimates. So in the future, say 5 years, 10 years from now, there may be we have to relook at items that are in there, look at what the current costs are, maybe make some adjustments in relation to rates for inflation, discount rates, stuff like that. But every year you'll see a gradual increase in this liability. That'll show on your statement of operations as accretion expense. So that's the term used in the increase of the asset retirement obligation. It works the same way as your tangible capital assets amortization. So they are non-cash expenses, but they flow through your operations, in which case if you're then having an annual surplus every year, you are then putting funds away in order to meet those obligations in the future as you go forward. So currently, if you take your financial asset position less your liabilities, you are in a net financial asset position of 5.7. So if you were to take your cash, collect your receivables, pay off all your liabilities, including your long-term debt, you would have sufficient resources right now to meet those obligations. All right. Your other main item here in your liabilities is your long-term debts. You had a couple new debentures in the year of $3.5 million, interest paid on those of 300, and then a current portion to be paid next year of 923. When it comes to your debt limits are calculated at 1.5 times total operating revenue of 43 million. Total debt of 9.5 left you with 33.5 million still unused, as well as your service on debt limit, which is 0.25 times the operating revenue, or 7.1 million. Debt to be serviced next year, principal and interest of 1.27, left you with an unused amount of 5.8 million. So again, back to the statement of financial position. Financial assets less liabilities of 5.7 million, so that's a $4.4 million increase. And then your non-financial assets, mainly made up of your tangible capital assets. So here, there's a couple some errors here, but the opening balance should be 80 million, not 298, in relation to the engineered structures being 58 million there. You had additions of 6 million, sand and salt shed and buildings there, engineered structures, Old Blue Ridge Road, Horse Creek Road, as well as ANC Road there, and then trucks and freight liners when it comes to vehicle additions in the year. Amortization should be a total of 7.1 million. That represents the usage of your assets. So again, as you purchase assets, they last 5 years, 10 years, 20, 40 years. You take a percentage of those and expense that into your operations, which reflects the total usage. So the $6.3 million addition, the use of $7.1 million, you kind of maintained your net book value there in your tangible capital assets at end of year at $79.2 million. When it comes to inventory for consumption, gravel on hand of 1.7 and materials of 384,000 make up the balance there, which left you a total non-financial asset position of 81.7. So you're to take that number and add in your net financial asset position of 5.7, you end up with a total accumulated surplus of 87.4, which is up $4 million from prior year, which is in line with which is your annual surplus for the year. So when it comes to your accumulated surplus, it's made up of a couple categories. Or a few here: unrestricted surplus, restricted, and equity and TCA. Your unrestricted and restricted amount can generate the sort of the cash component, or the amount there in relation to your net asset position. So that totals 24 million, and then tangible capital assets making up 63 million there. So with the change year over year being 4 million, you actually see an increase in your unrestricted and restricted reserves of 8 million. And a tangible capital asset decrease of 4. So,
Councillor Dean's had a question.
Thanks, Chair, through the chair. I note that the equity and the tangible capital assets has decreased by roughly $4 million. Is that just depreciation on those assets?
it'd be depreciation as well as the amount of debt that was taken on for addition, so that gets factored into there as well. So as the debt gets repaid, the adjustment to equity and TCA comes through there. And then there's also year over year, the asset retirement obligation goes against that as well. So it's kind of your net book value less your liabilities associated with it. So debt and ARO give you that equity and TCA number. So as those get drawn down, your equity and TCA will increase proportionate to, again, additional capital purchases over amortization. So those all factor in on the change.
Okay, thank you.
But it gives you a breakdown of how much of that 87 million is tied up in tangible assets and then how much is tied up in non. So like included in your unrestricted surplus and restricted surplus, also like your gravel costs is in there, prepaid expenses, those type of things, plus your cash position and receivables. So although your annual surplus is 4 million, there's actually a bigger increase when it came to the cash component of that being the restricted and unrestricted side versus the capital. Because sometimes you see, you'll have a surplus in the year, but it'll all be just an direct increase to equity and TCA as it relates to capital grant funding, whereas yours is more in relation to your operations side versus the capital there. So on the statement of operations, so here's a snapshot of your operating revenues. So this year you're up 3.8 million, up from 28.6 from 24.8. So it's the net municipal property taxes up about 15%, so 3% average increase in rates there, and then an 8% increase in overall assessment, or 8-9% there. When it comes to investment income, that was up to 1.4 from 614,000, as you saw increased rates throughout the year that impacted your investment income that you were earning on the caps that you had on hand. So leaving you again with an increase of 3.8 million, and as well as an increase from budget of 2.9. This pie chart here just kind of represents the proportion of how much of your revenue comes from taxes, which is 84% this year. Prior year was 85%. Other income of 5%. Government transfers for operating was up to 5 from 3, and then your investment income was up from 3 to 2 year over year. When it comes to expenses by function, so which departments here? So transportation was down to 13 million from 13.4. Administration was down to 5.8 from 6.5. So last year you had about a $500,000 adjustment to your allowance. So that's reflected in there. So that's why you see the administration costs there down year over year. Utilities and water management was up to almost 2 million from 1.7. Protective services includes your disaster recovery program costs, as well as an increase in wages there, up to 1.5 from 1.1. Legislative was also up. You had additional grants to other organizations in there, up to 800 from 613. And then again, leaving you with total expenses of 26.1, which is about a 1.1% decrease year over year. And then as well as a $1.5 million decrease, or 5.5% from budget. Turn here, this just kind of shows you where your budget was in line with your actual. So the line chart represents your budget, and then the dark blue represents your actual. So you see the line is just at or just above all the items there, except when it came to the protective services in relation to additional disaster recovery costs that were not part of the budget there. When it comes to expenses by object, so what the funds were spent on. So amortization, 7.1 million there. Salaries, wages, and benefits, just under 7 million versus prior year 6.6, as you had filled some positions there. Everything else is pretty much in line here. You saw a decrease a bit in your transfers to other local governments and materials, goods, and services, but then an increase in the transfer to other organizations was offset the difference in the local government transfer there. And then your new line item here is accretion on asset retirement obligations. So again, this $266,000 represents a change year over year in your asset retirement obligation. So you'll see that number kind of every year gradually increase as you stay along the path based on the rates and the estimates used for the adoption for January 1, 2022.
Sorry,
And then
Councillor Dean.
Yep.
This may be more of a political question, but I'll ask it anyway. In terms of retiring some of these projects because there's an environmental component, do you know if municipalities are successful in acquiring grants to help with that retirement?
I don't know anything about that at this point. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything available in relation to that. I have been getting questions, do we have to have the money set aside to fund this? And that's probably a political issue as well, or what you want to do going forward. But obviously the money is not needed now to retire these assets. It's estimated in the future based on when they do retire, and those dates could change as these assets last longer than maybe what was initially expected. So again, it's one of those things just to monitor and to be aware of to allow you to make better decisions there. So.
Thank you.
And then your provision for allowances, you'll see in the prior year there you have that $490,000 allowance change. This year it's only 25. Again, leave with you 26 million in expenses. This is just kind of another pie chart to break out the differences there. So when you take your total revenue less expenses, you end up with an operating surplus of just over 2.5 million for the year. When it comes to government transfers for capital, so capital income, MSI and Canada Community Building funding that was spent in the year of just under 1.5, leaves you with a total annual surplus of just over 4 million. So previously your accumulated surplus was at 89.4. There's a restatement here in relation to the adoption of the asset retirement obligations of just over 6 million. Left you with a revised accumulated surplus of 83.3. And if you add this year's annual surplus, you end up at 87.4. So in summary, based on Canadian public sector accounting standards, Woodlands County had an annual surplus of 4 million. Prior years was restated to 251,000. And then net asset position of 5.1, restated net assets to 1.3 there. So net asset position is still positive. When it comes to your audit findings report, I go over that, just discuss the restatement. We didn't have significant control deficiencies to know, no unusual accounting policies or estimates, unrecorded misstatements, and then no significant difficulties while performing our work. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, or just want to thank Lan and the team and Andrew there for getting us all the work we needed, stuff we needed to complete our work. And then if anybody has any questions there, before I jump into the other report, I can definitely take those.
Councillor Dean?
Just wanted to come to the significant control deficiencies. I didn't read that section of the report, but are you saying there are no significant control?
Well, we had some noted here just in our audit findings report in relation to some areas there. So payroll system access was an update from last year, some segregation of duties, as well as some journal entry reviews, but they're in our audit findings report. But
Okay.
yeah.
Anything else? Guess we're good to keep going.
Okay, all right, I'll jump into my other reports then. Oh, no problem. I can start talking in a minute. It's really, I don't know, you guys probably read this a bit, but the purpose of this report really is just to promote two-way communication between ourselves, the auditors, and yourselves as counselors. So as of today's date, in order to complete our audit, we'll complete our subsequent event procedures up to today. We'll obtain a signed management representation letter. We'll complete our required communication to council, which is what we're doing right now, and we'll obtain evidence of council's approval of the financial statements. Once we've obtained all those, we'll be able to issue signed audit financial statements. When it comes to changes from our audit plan in relation to our audit findings, the only change is in relation to materiality. So we initially set materiality based on prior year's actuals and then adjust while performing our work based on the current year actual numbers for the 2023 fiscal year. So when it comes to materiality, we used 1 million or 4% of operating expenses as our materiality. So what that means is that if the revenues or expenses of Woodlands County were to increase or decrease by $1 million, we feel that a user of the financial statement, so again yourselves as counselors, municipal affairs, may have a different view or outlook on the financial performance of Woodlands County. So we're saying we're given reasonable assurance. We're saying within our materiality thresholds, we feel the statements are in line with that. Again, we encounter no significant difficulties as we brought to the attention of council. When it comes to our engagement team here, so myself and then Claire McCord, who's the manager on the file. On the next slide here, we go over some audit results. So I'll just hit on a few of these. The main one being really management override of control. So management's in a unique position to potentially perpetrate or manipulate the financial statements, whether due to fraud or error. Could be to conform to budget, to adjust numbers to conform to what's approved in budget, to increase the annual surplus. So we use data analytic tools that identify journal entries with key characteristics in them. We then test those journal entries to ensure that they are valid business journal entries. So we didn't have any significant findings there, or in those entries. We did note some control deficiencies when it came to that, which is further in our report. When it comes to revenue recognition, we want to make sure that revenue is being recognized once performance obligations have been met here. So looking at your grant agreements, what costs were approved based on the application, ensuring that the costs meet the requirements within those agreements. So we didn't have any findings there. However, we have identified 2 unrecorded misstatements that are noted below in our report as well. On the next end here, when it comes to operating expenses, we did have, again, some unrecorded adjustments in relation to that. Salaries, wages, and benefits, we have additional findings in that area when it comes to duties of staff involved in that process as well. On the next page, cash and cash equivalents, we have additional control notes there in relation to bank reconciliations that we'll go over. We feel your receivable balances were good, so we had no significant findings there. When it comes to tangible capital assets, obviously a large component of your statement of financial position here. We want to ensure that items that have been capitalized meet the definition of tangible capital assets. Those items potentially could be an expense that need to be capitalized. You want to test those, or do you have potential assets that are impaired that need to be written off? So we want to inquire with management as to any impairment. When it comes to additions, we're looking at source documents there to ensure that those are accurately being reported, recalculating your amortization and gain and loss. So we didn't identify any significant findings. However, this is the first year of asset retirement obligations, so there was additional assets recorded in relation to the ARO adoption. When it comes to inventory for consumption, we want to make sure that your gravel balance is complete and accurate there, so a survey is being done, so we have an unrecorded misstatement in that area. And then asset retirement obligations. So really the risk here is obviously the first year of adopting the standard. Has completeness been met? So do we have all the assets that we should have in there? So again, we want to address and document the controls involved in that process and the procedures done by management to ensure for completeness. We're looking to recalculate as well as verify estimates or documentations to support those estimates from management. So again, just a significant accounting policy change there when it comes to asset retirement obligations. On the next slide here, when it comes to misstatements, so these are adjustments that were made after beginning our audits. There were 23 adjustments this year versus prior year's 10. We saw a decrease in assets of $102,000, a decrease in liabilities of $1.6 million, an increase to your accumulated surplus of $1.1 million, and a change in your annual surplus of just under $400,000. When it comes to unrecorded misstatements, we have 515,000 here of an overstatement of the county's surplus. So this is in relation to 5 different items here. So we adjusted your gravel inventory using an average conversion factor. We recognize the impact of opening accumulated surplus from developer levies that should have been recognized in prior years or recognized in the current year. We reversed revenue recognition when it came to Canada Community Building Fund that should have been recognized in prior years, and as well as reversed the Alberta Newsprint Company. Again, that should have been recognized in prior years. So a lot of these are just in relation to being reported in the current fiscal year where they should have been reported in previous ones. So netting an effective change on the income statement of 500,000, with materiality being in $1 million, we don't feel that this additional 500,000 being reported this year would result in anybody having a different opinion or view on the outlook of the performance of the county. So that's why they're reflected in the unrecorded misstatements as well as potentially being restated into the correct year. When it comes to restatements, so just here, just a note in relation to the asset retirement obligation, the changes there mainly being the decrease to the accumulated surplus opening of $6 million in order to record the increase in the asset retirement obligation of 7.7 and as well as additional TCA of 1.6. When it comes to control environment, other observations, so other than the matters discussed below here, we did not identify any significant control deficiencies. So an update here from your payroll system. So in 2023, we had noted that administrator level access had been reduced to upper management. However, many of these management personnel are not directly involved in processing payroll. So this level of access available to multiple employees creates an opportunity for fraud, as employees could change their pay rates and create fictitious employees. So we continue to recommend that those employees who are directly involved in payroll should have payroll access, and that should be it. When it comes to segregation of duties in payroll and HR, so the current year we observed that payroll employees were tasked with multiple responsibilities, including preparing payroll, executing employee payment through EFT, and entering payroll data. Moreover, other payroll and HR personnel assume dual roles, granting them access to both HR and payroll. So the risk there is that if you're in HR and you're putting the employees in, and then in payroll you're processing, if you're doing both, you could create an employee, pay an employee, and nobody would know because there's no additional oversight. So usually those duties are segregated in order to prevent that from happening within payroll. So looking for more, again, additional oversight there. Is there potential risk there for that to happen within the county? Same with AR and AP, so the same sort of thing there is when you could, in essence, be creating a fictitious payment and then paying or collections through the AR. So you look to, again, segregate duties there. When it comes to bank reconciliations, we just noted reoccurring delay in completing bank recs, so overstretching several months. So again, it's better to have those done frequently, more on a monthly basis, in case there are some transactions going through there that no one knows about, so that it could be identified or addressed sooner rather than later. And then manual journal entries. So here we talked about all finance individuals can create manual journal entries in the accounting system. So this use of manual entries is considered to be a primary method of overriding internal controls, so establishing strong controls over the creation and approval of these entries. So what we want to see is when entries are being prepared, that they be reviewed, prior to posting to make sure that they are valid entries that should be being made. So there's a bit of a segregation of duty error there. When it comes to your significant qualitative aspects of accounting policy, so again, the adoption of Accounting Sector 3280 asset retirement obligation. So county used the modified retroactive restatement approach, which was also advised by Municipal Affairs. So that restated your opening accumulated surplus against your asset retirement obligation versus a prospective approach, which would see a large expense coming through the statement of operations this year. Again, it's restated as it should have been there previously and adjusted against accumulated surplus directly. So that's the approach taken there, which is highlighted in note 24 as well in the financial statements. The next page talks about your accounting estimates. So overall, we're satisfied with the reasonability of your accounting estimates. We'll have a management letter that will also release to management that can be available to council upon request. When it comes to other matters here, we've had this one before in relation to your regional waste authority, as there's no audit or financial statement of that entity. So just recommending that that be considered in the future is maybe what to do is you're required to consolidate your proportionate share of that entity within your organization. When it comes to Appendix 1 here, so just independence, so just note here that we do not hold a financial interest, position, have a personal and business relationship or economic dependence on the county. Appendix 2 is our management representation letter, which we'll get a signed copy of and then be able to issue signed audit financial statements. Appendix 3, so there are 3 new accounting standards for next year. The main one being Public Sector Accounting 3400, so you'll see some additional disclosure requirements when it comes to revenue there. And then 4 years from now, December 31, 2027, you will see your financial statement presentation change once more as the statements will change. So what will happen is you'll have your financial assets. Your non-financial assets from the bottom will now move back up to the top of the financial statements. So you'll have financial assets plus non equals total. You'll then have financial liabilities, non-financial liabilities, and then you'll have a net asset component. The liabilities and the net assets will equal in line with your assets. So you'll have a balance sheet approach versus the current model you see today. You'll also have a new schedule for net financial assets, statement of operations, and then a new net asset schedule, which will show your accumulated surplus as you currently have it, unrestricted, restricted equity, and TCA, and then as well as an additional schedule, which is called remeasurement gain losses, which exists now, but because the county does not have any items that are reflected on a fair value measure for financial instruments. So if you had any investments or if you had any liabilities when it comes to interest rate swaps, we're seeing those with lending done through financial institutions versus the government. There's a risk there when it comes to interest rates. So you don't have any of those, so you don't see that schedule yet, but those would what would be involved in your new financial statement presentation 4 years from now. So that's it for my audit finance report. So I guess if anybody has any questions on that, I can definitely take them.
I get a quick question to get over to Councillor Wilhelm. First one, you're talking about the changes to the financial statement presentation we get in 2026. Is that an MGA mandate change, or is that just?
So that comes from the Institute of Professional Accountants for Canada there. So those standards get set nationally and then rolled out and followed throughout the country there. So yeah, the MGA just kind of talks about Canadian Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, which is a old term that was used quite a long time ago, but legally just kind of means the same thing in relation to the framework that you follow now.
Yeah, one more question I have. This might be something that Mr. Bichon can answer, but in regards to, I guess, the recommended segregation of duties on some of these perceived issues that have kind of come up here on payroll and everything that way. Is that just something where we just don't have the manpower right now and kind of what we're working with after the scale back in 2019?
Your worship, that's correct. And I believe this was identified the last 2 years as an issue. And it comes down to number of bodies.
Thank you. Councillor Wilhelm?
That was my question, why we hadn't dealt with any of these deficiencies yet.
Councillor Burrows?
So I just have one, so that we have a management letter coming in. Right?
Yeah, we usually issue those early.
And I guess, have the access levels been dealt with yet? Because we had access levels that were in there for upper management or multiple management access for payroll. So under your 2024 audit, you're still seeing that as well?
I'll leave that for that.
To the Chair of Council, I can take on that question. Yeah, so the access to the payroll is more like for between payroll and HR and like for not like for upper higher management because they completely don't have access to payroll. They only have access to approved timesheet, but they don't have access to payroll to update the change or create employee file, etc. It's just the overlap between the HR position and the payroll position. So that being recognized and it will be changed for coming up year, like for moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Wilhelm?
Well, motion that council approves the 2023 audit findings report and the audited financial statements and the financial information return of Woodlands County for the year ending December 31st, 2023.
Thank you very much. Got a motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll look forward to seeing you guys again for your next
You
one.
betcha. Thank you.
Been about an hour here. Does council want to take a quick 5-minute break?
Yes, please.
Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. We'll be back here just after 10:30. Nikita's.
That's the Christmas.
Good to know.
Okay, we are back. We do have Vicky online, our consultant, so we'll hop into 5.1 first. And then I'm gonna shuffle the agenda a little bit here because we do have Andrew online also. We'll hop down to 9.4 after, just so we can get him on with his day too. Okay, so where are we at here again? 5.1, Joan.
Good morning, Reeve and Council. So we have in front of us Bylaw 61124, which is the 2024 Woodlands County Municipal Development Plan document. Council provided first reading January 31st, 2024. Second reading was provided on April 15th, 2024. And HM Arrow was present to provide council with a presentation just outlining some of the activities that have been happening out at the airport as far as an airport vicinity protection plan and some development process and guidelines, in which it was indicated in their presentation that the municipal development plan addressed those items overall arching in that those documents could then be brought forward through the land use bylaw discussions. So I've just got in front of you today, Bylaw 61124, for consideration of third reading.
Okay, Councillor Wilhelm.
Through the chair to Joan, I apologize, I did miss the second reading, so I didn't see the feedback from the town. Was it a significant amount of feedback they gave us for the MDP, or the MDP?
There were about 3 or 4 items in which we have in turn made some of the recommended actions that they had requested. It was just amending a couple of the policies. A lot of the items that were in the letter were more around the intermunicipal development plan discussions. So those will come up at a later date.
Okay. Councillor Rose.
So, through the chair, I got another phone call from a resident that's kind of caught up in this floodplain and flood area type of thing. So, in around about 2014, the province remapped some of the flood fringe and floodway areas. And in the time previous to that, they weren't in the floodplain, and now they are. And when we look at documents like this that say no development at all in the floodplain, it puts them in a really difficult position, because you've got for example, let's say it's a mobile or whatever, they can't replace that. They're still on the hook for the mortgage. There's no development allowed to redevelop it unless they come up, 7 meters on the properties. And I think the statement in here is no development in flood areas. And I think still overall we need to have a council conversation on some of these flood development and how this is gonna work through the county. Like this document, last update was, this update is 13 years later, I think, from the MVP, is that correct? Yeah, so I don't wanna go 13 years and not update this again. So I would still like to have a conversation about some of these things before we pass this. And have that space to have conversation, because some of that floodplain, flood fringe, campgrounds are going to get caught up in that, trying to redevelop that have been affected by flood areas. So I just want to again have that opportunity to have this conversation. So I'm not going to vote for this today, and that's the reason.
John?
If I may, through the chair to Councillor Burrows, a lot of those items that you are talking about, again, this is the high-level document, and then in the land use bylaws where the specifics are that you're speaking about, and that's where the sections in our land use bylaw specifically indicate that no development within flood area unless there's flood hazard mapping, in which then in fringe areas you can develop accordingly with engineered design guidelines, or in the flood ways, which is a provincial aspect, that there's no development. So yes, those conversations definitely are going to be had during the land use bylaw review.
And again, I appreciate that. I just, the the reality is that this one document affects the other, and I don't think I understand quite enough as to how they dovetail together, and I know admin is probably, and the consultant is probably looking at this as the two documents, and they see the whole picture. I don't, as a counselor, see that whole picture right now, and that's why it makes it difficult for me. So I'm not trying to be obstructive, I just don't see that full picture yet, and I trust that we are gonna address some of these things. That's my hesitation on this end, and I wanna have this conversation as a council, not as, you know, individuals having conversations with admin. I want to have it as a council with admin and the guidance. So, thank you.
I think Vicky had her hand up there.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair to Councillor Burrows. If I may draw your attention to the MDP policy 3.1.12 on page 16 of the document. This is where we start talking about the flood risks and the flood hazard areas. 3.1.12 says the county shall not permit any permanent structures within the 1 in 100 year flood hazard of any river or stream unless flood proofing techniques are applied as recommended by a qualified professional in supporting technical analysis report, such as a geotechnical assessment or a hydrogeological assessment report. Policy 3.1.14 talks about the requirement of technical analysis by way of geotechnical or hydrogeological investigation to see whether there's an adequate building site. And if there is, that those should be about 0.5 meters above the floodplain levels. So those policies are not prohibiting development in flood risk or flood hazard. It's saying that if you're going to do development in those areas, you need to have some analysis done to support. So technically, like a geotechnical report will say, in this area, because of the substrate and the high water table, these kinds of concrete are more appropriate for basements. This should be the lowest that you would go from an elevation point of view for a basement, or maybe even that basements aren't required. It's not saying that you cannot do it. It's just saying that you need to be considerate of what's happening flood-wise and maybe do some technical things to support a more flood-proof structure. Thank you.
Councillor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to Vicky or Joan, that would be with regards to new development though, correct? Like I think what Councillor Burrow's concern is people who already have a location in there and then they get flooded out and they're very restricted into what they can rebuild into those locations. No, I guess that would fall over to potentially the land use bylaw where we can create, what's the word I'm looking for?
Grandfather.
We could either have a grandfathering clause or some other clause in place in the land use bylaws that could help mitigate those types of issues.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilhelm, exactly. So under the land use bylaw currently, there is a provision that council had approved, I want to believe it was back in 2017, in which if you've got an existing residence that has been identified in the flood hazard area, so which is essentially supposed to be a no-go. There is provision that council put in the land use bylaw that allows that individual to replace that resident if it's been destroyed beyond 75%, as well as it also allows for an additional accessory structure. Again, it requires the engineering to be completed along with it to ensure that it, if it ever is flooded again, that it can withstand that flood.
Councillor Rose?
Excuse me. To that end, that's exactly where some of these people are getting tripped up because they're damaged to the point of 50%. And they're not at full replacement. But they can't bring in a new modular or they can't replace it. It's been damaged, but it doesn't reach the 75% damaged limit. So they can't get there. And you know, some of these structures that we're talking about are, you know, 1970s, 1980s type structures. It's a gap, and originally I'm from Manitoba, so I had to deal with a lot of flooding, and like, you know, with respect to what our consultant Vicky said, you know, basement developments that are in any flood area, typically those are a no-go, because they do flood. Even if the waters are up to the edge of the house, the basements will flood. And if you don't have one, then, so it's common to restrict basement development at all. But anyways, there's a big conversation around this that still needs to occur as a council. And again, I don't quite get how this document dovetails into land use bylaws, and I don't want to cut ourselves off by approving this yet without understanding fully how we're going to address some of those things. Because some of them can be addressed in the MDP and some of them can be addressed in the land use bylaw, but until you have the two documents together. And to that end, is there anything that the municipality is going to suffer? I'll ask administration, we've had this previous MDP in place for 13 years. Is it really going to hurt us for another 6 months or so while we develop the land use bylaws in concert with the two documents to make sure that they dovetail? Is it going to hurt us to hold this off for 6 months while we develop those?
Joan?
Vicky, how are you?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Burrows. I mean, technically, no. You can postpone it for as long as you want. If we're thinking technically, your land use bylaw doesn't even have to comply with your municipal development plan. If you want to be sort of cheeky about it, it's a good idea for them to dovetail, like you say. There's nothing in the MDP currently that prohibits a more fulsome discussion at the appropriate level of detail, which is the land use bylaw. The MDP sets the stage at the higher level. As you may recall from your councillor training, there's that hierarchy of plans in Alberta where you have like the Municipal Government Act, then IDPs, intermunicipal development plans, then municipal development plans, then area structure plans, then land use bylaws. You know, it's a convoluted system in Alberta, unfortunately, but we're all beholden to it. So this dovetails into the land use bylaw by setting the stage for the kinds of regulations that your land use bylaw will talk about. Without your municipal development plan setting the stage, your land use bylaw doesn't know what to talk about. The land use bylaw implements the things that you say in your municipal development plan. So your policies in your municipal development plan get converted into regulations in your land use bylaw, which are sort of like the rules of the land. So when someone comes in for the permit, through the issuance of permits and subdivision approvals and that sort of thing, you're actually implementing the policies of your municipal development plan. And that's how those two documents relate. So there is sort of a pattern where you do your municipal development plan first. That gives you the marching orders for what you're going to talk about in your land use bylaw. And just a little bit of a side, I think you're aware we have a workshop coming up next week on the land use bylaw. This is exactly the kind of thing we're going to be talking about, is what are those key issues that we need to talk about in this land use bylaw during that land use bylaw discussion. And this is exactly one of those things that wants to be on that list. But I don't know that there is, yes, technically there's no harm to the land use bylaw process by not approving the MDP, but it's ready. And nothing that we're going to talk about in the land use bylaw is going to change the policies in the MDP necessarily, because they're high level. They're not at that level of specificity that something that we talk about at the land use bylaw is going to create. It's kind of like working in reverse. So we're going from lower specificity to higher specificity.
Thank you.
So the recommendation would be to move forward with your MDP. It gives you the marching orders for your land use bylaw.
Councillor Dean?
On that recommendation, I'd move that council give third reading to bylaw 61124 Woodlands County Municipal Development Plan.
Okay, motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? Not see any. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that one's carried. Move down to 9.4. 2024 final operating capital budget with the 5-year operating capital plans. Mr. Worrell. Oh, Andrew, can you hear us?
Yeah, just trying to get my camera on.
All right, whenever
Can you
you're
hear
ready,
me
sir.
fine?
Yeah,
Okay,
we got
thank
you there.
Good morning, Your Worship, members of council. You have an RFP before you in terms of finalizing our 2024 operating and capital budget. In addition, we provided a 5-year operating plan and a 5-year capital plan as per our strategic initiatives in our tactical business plan, and actually as required by municipal affairs. You have to have at least a 3-year operating plan and a 5-year capital plan. I've provided a presentation. I think we just might as well go through the presentation and then it speaks to all the changes that were made in the budget from the last release that council saw on December 20th. So if we could move to the presentation, Nikita, that'd be great.
Okay. Are you able to see that, Andrew, or no?
No, that's fine. As long as you have it up, I'll tell you what page, we move to pages, the next page. That's fine, thanks. So the first page of the budget kind of just outlines the assumptions in the budget. As we all know, we had a 3% tax increase for municipal taxes. That was committed under the recovery plan. We increased expenditures by 1% from the 2023 budget for controllable items. And council approved on December 20th additional initiatives of just over $1.8 million. Capital funded from taxation, we've basically formulated our plan based on the approval of council for $3.875 million in capital. And so anything that's changed in capital, what we've done is we've moved it to kind of a contingency side account so that capital will end up being exactly that amount available for administration to use in 2024. Net costs and budget, including the initiatives, was an increase of 7.41%. If you remove the initiatives, it's 0.56%, so below the 1% recovery plan threshold. Transfer to reserves, so basically the surplus that we have left over in our budget is $1.326 million. That's down about $650,000 from the December budget, and I'll explain the changes. So on the next page, you have the amendments to the budget that had no financial impact. So we basically just cleaned up some of the things that were in the budget that happened in the last 2 or 3 months, and fixed capital so that capital is actually being funded by the appropriate cost center now. So over the past 5 years, capital was budgeted in administration for 3 years. Then it was moved to infrastructure last year. We're now moving capital back to where the expenditures belong, so each department. So that's just moving the funds around, no change to capital expenditures. The mountain pine beetle work was canceled, so we eliminated the grant and the expense. Water crossing grant funds were deferred to 2024, so we have to defer those funds to match the expense. We reported a grant from TC Energy and added an offset expense for fire training upgrades. Policing budget was moved from general operations to patrol services. So that's where it used to show up back when we paid the town of Whitecourt for policing. And now it's just been sitting in our general operations account. So we've moved that budget into patrol services again. The cold mix budget the change was just a move to move $400,000 of the funds into reserves. So it's the same budget amount. It's just we're going to spend $200,000 on engineering, and $458 is going to be transferred into reserves. So the amended capital budget, as I mentioned, I did remove the green roller from the budget, but all savings that have been occurred so far, because Andre had some savings on some equipment costs, and the grain roller have been moved into the contingency line so that the total capital expenditures in the budget are still 3,875 as approved by council on December 20th, 2023. We also added operating carry forwards from 2023 of $735,000. So that was added to the 2024 budget. And you'll see you'll note that reserves on our financial statements were up in a number of areas. And that's a portion of that is due to carry forwards. So we're carrying forward capital carry forwards, and then we're carrying forward operating carry forwards. And they were put into reserves at year end. The small community opportunity grant that we got for economic development was added to the budget as a revenue source, but we created an offsetting expense line for all the costs, so it's a balanced approach. Our contribution was taken out of other funds in the economic development budget. So on the next slide, you'll see the changes. So we had some increased revenue, increased operating expenses, and decreased operating expenses. So the net change to our surplus was $667,895, really made up of mostly of one major accrual we had to make. Depreciation was up $61,000. That was due to the ARO assets being added. We have to now depreciate that portion of those assets going forward. And reserves were, the graders came in $26,000 less than our budget, so we have $26,000 that we don't have to take out of reserves for the grader purchases.
Just going to hold you for a second there, Andrew. Councillor Dean?
Through the chair, hi Andrew. That reduced surplus, you said it was made up mostly of one entity. Was that gravel?
No, on the next slide, you'll see what all the changes are. You'll see all the details, and you'll see the major entry that actually made up the almost the whole, or more than the whole amount, but we had other changes too. So there was offsets up and down. But on the next slide, you'll see the details.
Okay.
So if you could move the next slide, Nikita. So this page shows you the amendments that we made that had a financial impact to the budget. So some of them are pretty minor. So I gave the opportunity for staff to provide me with any changes that they had in their budgets, but most of them were pretty small. I will point out the NRED grant for municipal rebranding. So we were successful in that application, so we added that revenue into the budget. We already had the full expenditure of $125,000 budgeted. The big entry is we had to add into contingency reserves for property tax appeal. So we added in $932,000. So we have one major ratepayer that's appealed their taxes last year, and we accrued a contingency for that for 2023. But we were hoping to have the appeal done by now, but it's not even on the radar as far as I know, and it's probably not going to happen until later this year. So we had to accrue contingency for that tax revenue that we're going to collect in June from this ratepayer. If we're successful, then we basically have $2 million in reserves. If we're not successful, we'll have all the funds set aside. And if it's a middle ground, we'll have an opportunity to maybe have some funds in reserves. So it's really being very conservative. A worst case scenario, we'll have all the funds available to offset if the appellant wins fully their appeal. Another big amount was accretion expense. So as Jeff from Metrix pointed out, we now have to expense that every year. So we added a budget amount of $279,349. That will be annually. We'll have that'll be an annual amount that basically makes our liability grow each year until we get to the end of reclamation of the assets. So requisitions and tax revenue. So there was some changes basically they offset each other because requisitions are funded directly outside of the municipal taxation. So we found we didn't get the final school taxation invoice with the final assessment value from the province until last Friday, or maybe it was last Thursday. So I didn't have the ability to put that in the budget, and the requisition is up significantly. We did estimate an increase, but it ended up being about $70,000 more than that. Essentially, the province has kept the tax rates the same as last year, but they're keeping all the growth and passing that on to in the requisitions. So it's a considerable increase in the school requisitions for our taxpayers. The Lac St. Anne requisition and the Barrhead requisitions were both significantly increased. And so those also saw, all over 50% on the Barrhead requisition. I think it was 42% on Lac St. Anne. Smaller numbers, but still an impact to requisitions, a material impact to requisitions. And then that was those costs were offset by raising the tax rate so we'll recover those in taxes from our ratepayers. And then we found two errors on capital. We had the aerial photography in the budget twice. We had it under planning and lands and infrastructure, and we had the green bag roller in capital twice. We had it in ASB and in infrastructure. So we removed those items, and that had a positive impact of about $200,000. So at the end of the day, we actually had more positive impacts than negative, but the contingency appeal is so significant that it offset all those amounts, and that makes up the balance when you look at all these changes of roughly $667,000.
Mr. World, just a quick question on the requisition side. Given that you expressed those are obviously going up over last year from the province, do you have any idea as far as percentage-wise what ratepayers might expect on their assessment for the provincial part?
Yes, Your Worship. So we actually have already created the mill rate bylaw, so we have an idea of what the increases are. And on the school side, I think the number came in close to 14% overall for the whole county. Now, whether that is going to hit each individual that way, it depends on their assessment growth, right? If they have any assessment growth. If they have the exact same assessment, they're going to see a probably close to 14% increase in school taxes.
Thank you.
And that's similar for, if your assessment doesn't change on the senior recs, similar, you're going to see a very large increase on your requisitions from the seniors foundations.
Ouch.
Any more questions on that? We can move just forward to the capital budget. No major changes on the capital budget. We did add 5 more carry forwards to the capital budget. We had 2 servers at both of our office locations. We carried forward the funds for the water fill station at Anselmo Fire Hall. We carried forward the vehicle lift column. It's one of 3, I guess. I think we got 2 delivered and 1 did not come in time. And then we had a truck that was missing on a train somewhere, and it didn't come till January. We now have it, but we carried it forward because the funds were not sent out until January. So and the rest are the same as an interim budget. Then the 3.875 million that we have for capital, we've made some adjustments for the actuals that we've seen from the prices that we've gotten on the graders, on the skid steer, on the rubber tire hole. The engineering was lower on the runway. We removed the grain bag roller. The tandem plow center was less than budget. And so what we did with those funds is we moved them into line 30, which is called basically a contingency. So council would have some flexibility to have some capital dollars available to do some work if they choose to do so. Or if it doesn't get expended, it'll go to surplus at the end of the year. And we added one item for $2,539. It was a missed battery pack for the Ford server. And so that came in, and we did not have that accrued in advance for our carry forward. So the balance of this budget is exactly as it was at the interim budget, other than the $26,000 in reserves that we don't have to send out for the graders. Everything else remains the same. And I broke it out, I think council may not be aware, but some of our items that we put in our capital budget are actually operating budget. So we have to distinguish between items that are repair and not related to improving an asset. So we break those out, and we're calling them capital maintenance now. So we want to leave them in our capital budget, but we want to call it capital maintenance so that for when we do our assets at the end of the year, we're not allowed to set those up as capital as per our TCA policy. So just a distinction. It makes it easier for us at year end. We'll have our coding correct in our budget, but we still like to keep it in capital just so you're aware that we're not trying to spend additional capital dollars that we're putting it in our operating budget. And then our operating budget, if you can move a few slides. So you can see we have a 3% municipal tax increase based on our 2023 actuals, but overall tax revenue is going up about 4.9% with the requisition increases. Other revenue from own sources is up. That's mostly due to I think increased interest on our compared to 2023 budget. Grants, we got additional grants for from the province, an increase in our grant for capital, and transfers. That number is just between reserve accounts, and we're putting more money in. We had more money into carry forwards. Vehicle disposal, we're going to sell a piece of equipment, and as council is aware, that has to go into reserves, so that's going into equipment replacement reserves. And then general operating revenue is down because we're not planning on applying for any school taxes returned from the province. So our hope is that we don't have to write up any taxes in 2024. The subledger is fairly clean. We do have two ratepayers that have, or one ratepayer that has defaulted on their payment plan, and we have some concerns about them. They're only 1 year behind on taxes, but our understanding is they're not paying their bills. So we have set that up in our allowance for doubtful accounts. So we've got that in technically in our tax receivable as a potential write-off. Next slide, you'll just see that this is just a calculation that shows you comparing apples to apples, 24 versus 23 budget. We removed the one-time issues or entries. We removed the requisitions for school boards, and we removed the transfer from reserves for surplus. And then we show the 7.41% increase in expenses over last year's budget. We removed the initiatives, and we show a 0.56% increase. And so overall, we have about 116,584 excess funds excess funds that we are not spending out of our 1% allotment. But that's after council's approved all of our initiatives, including, well, you can see on the next page is the initiatives. We'll show you this. You're aware of these initiatives. You approved them at the December 20th council meeting. We've made no changes to them. And we have hired, so far we have hired, I think 2 or 3 of the staff that were approved by council. And we're in the process of, we have one more position in finance that we have to rewrite the job description because we promoted internally. And so we need to change the job description to reflect what the person will be doing. I will indicate after the financial statement review, when they talked about our issue with having people covering other jobs. So we have a real struggle with staffing not being able to cover positions, right? So we have people that do accounts payable and accounts receivable. We have our payroll person backed up by our HR person. So we're working on that. Land's going to come up with a plan so we can eliminate some of these issues, but without hiring another staff member, it is going to be a challenge. So we're going to maybe have to put some more checks and balances in terms of who approves updating of utility bills it might have to be more coordinated by one person instead of having it done by individuals. So we are going to come up with a plan for council that gives them comfort that we're trying to protect ourselves from those risks without asking for additional staff that we really don't need. And then the next page just talks about the staffing. So we're basically back to the pre-recovery level of staffing. I think we basically have the same number of positions. So we get the new director on board at the end of the May, and we hire the other position in finance. I think we have all the positions filled except for the assistant CAO job. I have not. That has not gone out for competition, I don't believe. And the next page just kind of shows you the changes in more detail, because there is some significant movements between departments. So I've noted each department what the major changes are. I see it didn't fit very well on some of the comments, but under legislative, we removed the Fort Celebration, which we did not have in 2024. Contingency for property tax appeals, we did not budget for that last year's, and we are budgeting for it this year. Under general admin, we're moving policing to patrol services. Under admin, we have a lower surplus in 2024 for transfer to operating reserves, so that's why our budget is lower compared to last year. We had a bigger transfer to reserves. And then you can see patrol services, same thing, provincial policing costs, fire in the fort, fire general, that's a half-time position is the majority of that increase. The fire halls of seeing an increase because we're going to be doing some security upgrades at all the facilities, and Selmo's getting some septic system work. The roads and sidewalks is up because of 2 equipment operator positions. And the rest of that note was the 2, I don't remember what that was. I got it over here. Well, yeah, 2 greater leases were removed, but we put those to, so we had budgeted 2 greater leases, but what we're doing now is, because you've accepted the purchase of reserve or graders out of reserves, we took those 600,000 and we put it into transfer to reserves to fund those graders, and we're going to have that amount every year as per a 5-year plan so that we can replace the graders on a regular basis. So it's no change in funding, but just we moved it into transfer to reserves from the grader leases. And then the airport, we had the airport regional grant. So the airport was successful in getting a regional grant of about 98,000, I believe it was. And so we added the costs into the budget. And, the grant was 82,000, and our share brought the cost up to 98,000. So we put those costs in the budget, so that we have that covered in 2024. And then sewage treatment, we're going to camera the sewer lines in the Fort and Blue Ridge. That was a significant increase in the budgets. And then water treatment was up because of the PLC replacement. That was in the capital budget, but again, that is not considered capital for our TCA purposes. Planning and lands is up a bit because of they have the carry forwards for aerial and contour mapping. Library is up from new library programming. FCSS Barhead was the FCSS had a new agreement with Barhead, and that was a large increase in our FCSS costs. And then economic development, it was a half-time position, and the grant that we were successful at getting, those costs were added into the budget to match the grant. Recreation, parks, and facilities is up because of the new director position, and capital transferred from infrastructure. So that was the 180,000 for the aerial photography. And requisitions is up to 7.7%. That's again fairly large increases in senior requisitions and school requisitions. And what's else? Okay, then at the bottom, I'm removing some of the things that are in first time in the budget, and you get again, the bottom line of 7.41% increase in expenses over last year, 0.56 if you take out the initiatives. So that's the end of the presentation on the 2024 capital and operating budget. The next 2 pages are 5-year plans that we want council to also approve today if they see so fit. So I've created a 5-year operating plan, and I'll give you some of the summaries of it. It's hard to read. I hope you have the bit larger version that you were supposed to be provided with, because it's much easier to read on the large version. So what we did was we basically started with the baseline of the 2024 budget. That's kind of our baseline cost, so we know what we've set for our budget. And then I made some assumptions in terms of assessment growth that we're going to actually consider to be new assessment growth, inflation, and a potential tax increase to balance the budget. So ultimately, that's the balancing number. We try to make it balanced to equal a not a surplus, balanced budget, but it does include a number of entries to reserves, which I would want to walk you through. So we're still planning on an annual basis, based on our current year's reserve of 1.325 million. We're still planning to carry that forward. We want to be able to still carry forward some surplus funds so that we're building our reserve portfolio. So I've left that in. The capital from operations number in here is from Andre's 5-year capital plan, which is the page you'll see next. And one of the reasons why the tax rate is going up for 2025 is because we do have actually increased capital in the budget in that plan. That's the plan right now in the document. So that's why there's an increase. But council obviously has flexibility each year in the budget to determine what the actual capital will be. We're adding to reserves an entry for equipment replacement reserve of 600,000 is in the 2024 budget. We're going to continue that forward, and we're going to grow that number by $200,000 a year, so that by the time we get to 2029, we're putting away about $1.4 million. This will all that's not just for equipment, that'll be for roads and bridges, but we want to grow our reserves. But this will tie into our reserve plan once we bring that to council at some point in time, because we still don't know what we should have for reserves. We need to bring forward a full reserve plan to council, considering debt financing and so borrowing reserves, what we should be at, what we need for equipment. All this information has to be brought to council in a full report. So we're not there yet. It probably won't happen till later this year, but we know it's necessary that we need to build our reserves over the next 5 years. Another amount that I've added in to capital reserves is for the ARO reclamation. So as Jeff from Metrix pointed out, we basically now have a $7 million or $8 million liability on our books that's unfunded. We don't have one penny put away for it. We didn't have any reserves set aside for reclamation costs. So we have to fund that over the next 30 years. So basically the 2 biggest assets that we have that are in our ARO balance is our sewage lagoons. They are probably 85% of the cost. And right now their useful life is still 28 years. So we're talking about a very long-term liability that we have to fund. But we need to start doing that. So I'm suggesting that we start with a reasonable amount and we grow it annually I did it over 28 years is what I did, so that we'll have enough funds over 28 years, including inflation, so that we have enough funds available that when we would reclaim those lagoons, the money's in the bank. So that's part of this 5-year plan. We've also kept in the plan the $1 million for allowance for doubtful accounts. We feel fairly strongly that we won't need those funds always, but there is, like I say, one large taxpayer that has not paid their taxes, and it is over $1 million. However, it has already been set up as an allowance, so it would be new taxpayers that kind of come up on the list that we might see that are having troubles paying their taxes. Biggest concern for me is the price of natural gas. We're at the price of natural gas right now. I've talked to some of a couple of the oil companies or the gas companies in the county, and they say at $1.80, they don't make any money. So it's really dependent upon what happens with natural gas. And if we see that price stay low for a long period of time, we're going to see additional ratepayers get into financial difficulties. So we hate to see that happen again and grow like it had in the past, but that is really dependent upon the resource price.
Just gonna hold you for a second there, Andrew. Councillor Dean?
Thanks, through the chair to Andrew. Coming back to that ARO reclamation, I'm gonna ask you the same question I asked our auditors. Do you know of any program where the province will help with that, or are we fully funding that reclamation over that 28-year period?
Through the chair to Councillor Dean. So my understanding is that it's just 100% on the municipality right now. I think the government's view would be we should have been saving for this all along. We have gravel pits. We knew we have to reclaim them at some point. We knew we have sewage lagoons. You know, it should have been contemplated by all municipalities, and some have reserves for, especially for gravel. Most municipalities have gravel reserves for reclamation. They put a certain amount of money away every year, and the county has not done that.
Okay.
So we do have to fund that. Maybe the government at some point in time may have a program, but I think their view would be why didn't you save for that already?
Okay.
Thank you.
And the other thing in the operating plan is we have increased debenture costs. So I think the good part about the plan, you're not seeing very large tax increases to get where we want to be. It saves, in this terms of this next 5-year period, we'd be putting away about another $12 million in reserves. And I think we'd be in a much solid, much better condition, certainly compared to 5 years ago. And I think you saw in the financial statements, we have reserves and accumulated surplus of now around $23 million. And those numbers at the beginning of the recovery plan were probably, $6 million, $5 million. So we believe that the recovery plan was 100% successful, and by the end of 24, you have met your goals in the recovery plan. So, I know it was tough on the county over those 5 years in terms of resources and cutbacks on service levels, but it was successful in meeting what council approved 5 years ago. And then the capital plan, the 5-year capital plan, this comes from our 20-year capital plan, but we felt we should just bring forward a 5-year capital plan to council at this point for approval. It's more realistic. And actually, we actually have, in many of the years, we actually don't even have enough capital listed on this report to add up to the 3.875 million that we've kind of approved annually. So I've put that into contingency. So we have some fairly good flexibility in the 5 years to add some additional capital or take those capital dollars and reduce our borrowing instead. So, because we do have some debentures in here, and for example, if you look at 2026, we're saying we're going to borrow 2.5 million for East Mountain Road, but we also have 1.3 million dollars in kind of contingency. So we have some flexibility there that we may not have to borrow as much funds, or council could add additional capital. We're still got to be aware that we're on, as far as municipal affairs is concerned, we're falling behind on capital. 2024 will be a year where we'll be fine. 2023, we probably were very close to adding enough capital to be close to our amortization. But that is something that we're still being red flagged on, is not spending enough money on capital. The other issue in the capital plan is the airport runway debenture grant for that 6.75 million in 2026. I mean, that sounds like it's very dependent upon whether we get a grant for that, and I'm under the impression that could be moved to 2025. I'm not sure, but it's in our 2026 plan. So if there's any questions about the plans, at the end of the day, we feel like these are going to get us into much better shape in terms of having resources for the future, and without having to raise taxes significantly for our ratepayers, at least municipal taxes. which is what we really control.
Thank you for the presentation there, Andrew. Councillor Wilhelm?
So through the chair to council, I got two items I want to talk about with regards to the capital budget. I'll do the easiest one first, and it's the line item cold mix program. I wonder if we want to make a change on what we're calling that, maybe change it to subdivision road program, because I think one, calling it cold mix might calling it a cold mix program might create expectations from residents with regards to cold mix. So if we rename it to a subdivision road program, that money that we're socking away each year in our 5-year capital plan can go not only to potentially putting cold mix, but also maybe potentially putting asphalt or doing subsurface and road upgrades to gravel roads themselves. So I think that I would like to make a change with regards to that money that we're putting away, and to not only socking away to cold mix, but to an overall a subdivision road program. So that's the first thing I want to discuss. I just wanted to get your guys' ideas on that or thoughts.
No, I do agree with you. I mean, if we leave it listed as cold mix, we do, I mean, the idea is to rehab those roads and do something that'll work better and bring back the quality and the service that the people had there. But, you know, like you said, maybe we find cold mix in some of those areas isn't the option. So yeah, maybe a subdivision road enhancement or something that might be more appropriate. Councillor Williams?
Does subdivision limit it to though? Like if it's, some of these roads aren't to a subdivision, they're just a county road. I don't know what the name is, but I agree that it's probably something we should rename.
Councillor Wilhelm?
Yeah, I think that's the name that just came up off the top of my head. I think some of the primary roads, like an East and West Mountain Road, that doesn't need to be included in this type of situation, right? Like we would create, as Councilor Rose likes to use often, service levels for these subdivisions and their roads, and then what kind of investment we want to do on those service levels and what kind of investment we want to get back with local improvement taxes on those. So that's where I'd like to see this money that we've got currently earmarked in the 5-year budget to go to those types of programs specifically. East and West Mountain Road or other main industry roads, those will get their own capital contributions in the future. But if we're starting to create a fund for these potentially increased, or at least bringing some roads back up to a base service level, I think it's a better program for the future.
Mr. World?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wilhelm, we can definitely change the name to be more descriptive of that, of not talking specifically about cold mix, but make it more descriptive in terms of that it's for subdivision development, and or you could maybe even say other. If you're worried about other roads, I guess we could add some and other subdivision development and other. If you were worried about other roads. Yeah, and it just the descriptor itself, just for future councils, if I'm not here, we all change over in a year or so. It sets a precedent of what that money's being put away for. It's not just being put away for just cold mix. It's being put away for all subdivision roads and making sure that they're maintaining specific service levels.
And you had a sorry, Mr. Bashan?
Your worship, members of council, administration will take this away and come back with an alternate name for that program, and we'll just send out an email identifying what we're calling it.
And Councillor Wilhelm, you had a second.
My second item is more of is a line item on here, item 25. I think we had talked about this previously, and I'm sorry to step on your toes, Councillor Burrows, but item 25, I would like to not be in the 2024 budget as we continue to work. That item 25 is the office admin paving line item. Last year and this year we're seeing degradation or removal of cold mix in some of the subdivisions, and this project itself will be a very visible one to residents driving in and out of town, watching us pave our office road as they see their either cold mix roads degrade or have currently had their cold mix roads removed from them. And I don't know about you guys, but it's a little bit of, it's going to create a lot of issues, and I'm going to have to field a lot of phone calls onto why we're paving the office road as we're currently degrading other people's, or removing other people's roads at the same time. So I would like this one at least shifted to 2025 until we can have a solid plan in place for those residents who are seeing a decrease in service level on their subdivisions.
I hear Councillor Wilhelm, because I actually had the same notes in mind to bring up, so. Any other discussion? Councillor Burrows.
So, yeah, I was actually gonna bring this up because we have an expenditure later on that's unbudgeted, and I was gonna bring it up in this, that we actually, rather than pull from, the surplus, that we knock one of these items off, and that was my item, actually, so I'm really glad you brought that up, so perfect. I like your idea of the, road surface service level, something like that, maybe, I don't know. The question that I had for Mr. World is, and I think this is an important one, when we get to, and I'll call it the cold mix because it's on the sheet as the cold mix in the capital budget under the 5-year plan. I noticed when you look at the, I got the wrong page, operating budget, you have expenditure increases based on 2%, 3% inflationary pressures. Those same inflationary pressures are gonna drive our costs on cold mixed roads, I would expect. And so we have the fixed cost of $658 in 2024 all the way up to 2029. So I would like to suggest that we at least add some inflationary, because I think when we look at service levels, sometimes people say, well, if we do this service level now, it's $100,000 a year. And by the time we get 10 years out, it's $160,000 a year. And we have to be really cognizant of that as a council as to where we're going with service levels. So that's my question and my statement, and I'll ask Mr. World for a response on that.
Through the chair to Councillor Burrows. So, yeah, we've left these numbers flat in terms of this document for the 5-year plan, but when they tie back into our operating plan, they're inflated by the inflation rate. Because all these numbers are through taxation. So the $3,875,500 a year that we spend on capital, which is what these numbers are, they're getting inflated in my operating budget each year. So I could make that inflation in here, they would still tie to my operating budget because I'm already inflating them each year by the inflation rate.
Yeah, if I could follow up. I just think it's important that when we present this in a public document, people see those costs going up annually, so that they're prepared for it, rather than a, excuse me, a 5-year block. I get where you're going, I completely do. I'd just like to see it illustrated that way, if council's amenable.
Any other, Councillor Wilhelm?
So through the chair to council, so with regards to my previous comments, what are your guys' thoughts on moving that line item to 2025? Like, once my residents specifically are going to be driving by, watching them pave, and say, what the heck is going on here? Why is this an allowable expense when our roads aren't worth spending money on? So I would like to at least move this to 2025 for discussion in 2025, and then take that 80,000 and move it into our to be determined line item. And in case we have any emergent capital projects that come up this year, and we at least have additional funds in place for those types of things. So that's my suggestion. I just wanted to know what council's opinion on it was.
Discussion. Councillor Burrows?
I would support the change. I mean, if we make the motion to accept the plans is that in the capital budget? That's in the capital budget. Accept the capital budget with the removal of that 80,000, or moving that 80,000 into the contingency portion, or which I think we're going to have to dip into right away with that other expenditure. But I'd fully support that if you want to make that motion.
Councillor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to acting CAO, do you need a full motion to make those changes, or do you just take that into consideration if I say as per discussed? As per discussed, or a full motion?
I want a resolution.
Okay, I can do that. I'll write it up here.
Yeah, so sorry, if I could, the motion here is that, the final operating and capital budget with 5-year operating and capital plans to pass that. So that's the document in front of it. So we'd have to amend
Yeah.
that capital plan to remove the 80,000 and place it where you'd like it.
Okay.
And then make the motion to pass it as amended.
To do it in two motions.
So I'd have to motion to amend first, and then motion to accept the amended.
I think that would be cleanest.
Yeah, through the council, I agree with Councillor Burrow's recommendation that first make a resolution for the moving of the funds, and then the second motion would be to accept as amended.
But before we make the motion, Councillor Dean, I'm not sure if I got you with your comment.
Yeah, thanks. So I also, I don't know if we need this in a form of a motion, but the dust control issue that I wanted to bring up, that was going to be part of this discussion. There's a resident that lives along West Mountain Road after the pavement ends, and that resident experiences significant dust for visitors traveling to Hard Luck Canyon, and so they've asked if they could have some dust control there, similar to the dust control that's put along the Cut Banks Road to the tubing site. So do we need a motion? First of all, I'm looking for support from council to add that into the budget, either operating or capital. And the question would be is, do I need that in the form of a motion?
Question for Mr. Bashan, have we looked at the cost on that?
Through the chair, well, to all the council, the costs are less than $1,000, so we can accommodate that within our operating budget. But council should pass a motion to add that to the county's dust control program, and that way it'll be carried forward to 2025 in the future.
And I can make that motion at the time, whenever that needs to be made.
We're going through this, I think it would be probably pertinent to do that motion first, and then have Jeremy pass his next two.
Okay, so I move that council directs administration to include dust control on, should I name the resident?
No, the road.
The road, on West Mountain Road on the way to Hard Luck. A 200-meter strip of dust control.
And
Mr. Bashan?
should I also identify in front of the particular residence? You don't have to say the name, just in front of a residence.
Okay, so then, maybe I should start over? So I'd move that council directs administration to include 200 meters of dust control in front of a residence on West Mountain Road on the way to Hard Luck Canyon.
Okay, work for you?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll start with that there. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. Call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Councillor Wilhelm?
Okay, I'll motion to move line item 25, office admin office paving, from the 2024 capital budget to the 2025 capital budget for discussion, and move the budgeted $80,000 to the to be determined capital projects line 30.
Perfect. Thank you. With that, any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. Call the question. All in favor? That one's carried. Councillor Wilhelm?
I'll motion that council adopts the 2024 operating and capital budget, 5-year operating plan, and 5-year capital plan as amended.
Thank you very much. Call the question. That all in favor? And that's carried. Jumping around a little bit here. Thank you very much, Andrew, for your time today in the presentation.
Okay, thank you for having me. I'll make those amendments, Your Worship, I'll make those amendments. And I'll adjust the 5-year capital plan to reflect inflation. It's in there, but it's just through kind of backwards way, and I'll fix that so it ties together to the operating plan.
Thank you again. Just seeing that we have Don Forden online there too. We're going to jump up to 9.1, and then we'll get back in order with the agenda here after. Can you hear us, Don?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Reeve and Council. So in front of you, you have a request for decision for the Beaver control contract. And it's an unbudgeted expenditure. So our contract had to be renewed this year. We did put the request for proposal out to for bids, and we did receive one bid from our previous contractor, and the bid was quite a bit higher than expected, and that's due to increased costs that the trapper is going to be incurring just due to the price increase on various items. So that being said, we have an unbudgeted expenditure that would be required for completing the contract of $10,977, and this would be accounted for in the infrastructure Beaver control budget. We do split the costs for the Beaver control between agriculture services, budget for private lands, Beaver control, and then the infrastructure part of it is for our roads and anything that's affecting our infrastructure. So when we created the budget, unfortunately, there wasn't enough accounted for in the infrastructure part of the budget. So that's why I'm coming to you for the approval of that unbudgeted expenditure to be a source, from the accumulated surplus for 2024.
Just one question for you, Don, a point of clarification. In our recommendation, it says a cost of $10,997. In the costing says $10,977. I'm just not sure which number we're using.
Yeah, you're correct. And that was a mistake on my part. I would go with the just 997, sorry, would be the amount. Yes, just to clarify, it would be $10,997.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dean?
If there's no questions from council, I'd move that we approve the unbudgeted expenditure of $10,997 GST excluded to be sourced from the accumulated surplus for the 2024 Beaver control trapping contract.
Okay, Councillor Burrows speaking to the motion.
Yeah, just maybe a friendly amendment, rather than it be from the accumulated surplus, that it be from that 80,000 that we just moved on the pavement, which we moved to specifically, where did that go?
It went to the to be determined projects.
So we pull it out of the to be determined.
Mr. Bashan?
Your worship, that would have to be a motion to transfer from the capital budget to the operating budget.
Yeah, we do.
Mr. Bashan?
The cleanest way to do it would be the accumulated surplus.
Andrew, did you have your hand up there, sorry?
Yes, your worship, I think the only thing I would change would be, I would just take it out of the current year surplus. So we have a surplus budget this year. And if I had got the amendment from Don like 2 days earlier, we could have had it in the budget. So I would just take it out of the current surplus instead of the accumulated surplus.
I'd accept that as an amendment.
Okay, so amendment to come out of the current surplus as recommended by Andrew.
And I'm thinking we probably want to say current operating surplus. That's the surplus you're talking about, right?
2023.
Okay. Okay, motion on the
Your worship, would be the 2024 current year surplus.
2024 current year surplus. So motion for $10,997 from the 2024 current year's operating surplus. Any discussion on that? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, that one's approved. Thank you guys very much. Move up, back in order here, the mirror agenda now, 7.1 compact track loader purchase.
Your worship, members of council, At the last two council meetings ago, March 27th, a presentation was made for the purchase of a compact track loader. Council passed a motion that administration bring back to council the 2024 compact track loader staff rating specification and the availability of attachments. So attached to the RFD is a spreadsheet identifying all the units that we received pricing on, where they either met or did not meet the specifications and the costs. Also attached are the written comments from the operators. When I did some further research on the Takahauchi, it was identified that they did not meet the spec for the FOB Woodlands for Assiniboine warranty work. I also was able to determine that when we did the demo on it, the hydraulics were turned down 50%. The supplier identified that when they send units out for demos, that's standard. They don't send them out at full strength. So the comments from the operators about lacking power were valid based on what we were able to find out. So all the other bidders did bid on the warranty being FOB, the Fort Assiniboine, other than the Takahauchi. Administration's recommendation remains the same, that council award the 2024 compact track loader case TV 370B to Rocky Mountain Equipment for $113,760 plus taxes.
Well, thank you very much for bringing this back and having the extra information. And when we had the discussion before, like I realize now they had it turned down, that would definitely make sense on why it seems so underpowered compared to the rest. But when it comes to the warranty portion, if we're going to have something that's going to have issues going to, let's say get repaired, or if something comes up, that's not beneficial to us either. It's Councillor Burrows.
Excuse me. Yeah, so I don't have an issue with the recommended action, but what I wanted to do is just, I spent a day going through some policies. So under our purchasing policy, we've got request for tender, request for proposal. The lowest bid tender proposal will not necessarily be accepted depending on the goods and services being required or requested. Bid evaluation and selection may be based on quantitative and qualitative criteria, which is to be identified in the document prior to the close of the tender proposal. The nature of the evaluation and selection criteria, but not specific to the factors or weights, can be made known to the prospective suppliers. Adequate documentation to record the evaluation and selection process will be created and retained. So if I don't have that in front of me as a counselor, I can't say I'm going to buy the second highest priced piece of equipment based on a score that I don't understand. So that's why I wanted to see this back. So I have no problem with the recommendation, but I think that this illustrates an issue around our procurement in the fact that whenever we go out for these, under our procurement program, whenever we go out for these, we have to do multiple quotes. There's a lot of administrative time involved in this. The administration had to do it over again, kind of prepare it again, bring it back. So I would like to make two motions. One is that we accept the recommended action, and the second is that we forward a discussion on procurement to a G&P meeting. Because I think that if we end up having a look at a program like Canoe, they actually do all that procurement ahead of time. So you spec a piece of equipment and they say, that's the lowest price we can get you, and it meets the qualifications. So it removes a ton of administrative time. And I'd like to see if this is a program that's worth looking at. But I think G&P would be the spot to do it. So if, unless there's any other discussion on it, I'll try and find where the recommended action is here, because I've been bouncing back and forth. But I would move that council award the 2024 compact track loader case TV370B to Rocky Mountain Equipment for $113,760 plus taxes.
Okay, thank you. Motion on the floor. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All in favor? That one's carried. Councilor Burrows?
My second motion would be that we forward the procurement policy and look at the canoe procurement to a future governance and priorities meeting.
Okay, administration has that. Thank you very much. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. Call the question. All in favor? That one's carried. Thank you. We'll try to get through the nines here. I don't think this will take, with your new business, won't take too long to get through, then we'll take a break before we get to reports. 9.2 amended policy 1977 remote work.
Your worship, members of council, at the April 15th council meeting, there was a requested notice of motion to bring policy 1977 remote work forward for review. The policy was reviewed and amendments are being presented that identifies that how directors and the chief administrative officer are eligible for remote work opportunities. It clarifies the processes and procedures for who shall review and approve remote work circumstances. Requests are in writing. It includes, as I mentioned, directors, chief administrative officer, CEO and council are responsible for ensuring employees are meeting expectation roles, responsibilities, and which role shall coordinate the remote work request. The draft policy is attached, and the recommendation is that council adopt amended policy 1977 remote work as presented.
Thank you very much for that. And just a quick discussion around that. When we took a look at the policy, it was fairly encompassing of all employees. It didn't really describe with our senior management as far as if they were going to utilize the process, especially with the CAO and his, I guess, duties to the organization around, you know, how that actually worked and how that would play out. So we wanted to make sure that we had something that encompassed the senior management, just to make sure that they're not, you know, not to say that employees aren't going to, you know, are going to take advantage of the policy, but that there's at least a kind of a mechanism there to make sure that they're meeting the requirements of what they're doing, and that the working remotely is, you'll say, approved and covered from the next level up to make sure that it's in compliance with the organization. So, any other discussion from council? Councilor Rose?
Just one question. Is this, are we amending this policy, or are we canceling one and calling this a different policy?
This is an amended policy.
Okay.
Councilor Wilhelm?
A motion that council adopts the amended policy 1977 remote work as presented.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that one's carried. 9.3 strategic plan review.
Your worship, members of council, council adopted the 2022 to 2025 strategic plan in an attempt to ensure that the plan is being followed and carried forward, and that updates are presented, and that the plan is amended. Administration is recommending that council direct administration to schedule the 2022 to 2025 strategic plan review in June of 2024.
Okay. Well, since we've seen that in front of us, we good to run through that again. Any discussion? Councilor Dean?
Through the chair to Andre, just from a scheduling point of view, is this a doodle poll again?
Through the chair, it will be, yes.
Okay. I move that council directs administration to schedule the 2022 to 2025 strategic plan review in June of 2024.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any, call the question, all in favor? That one's carried. Last one in new business will come down to 9.5, airport development process and guideline.
Your worship, members of council, at the April 17th Governance and Policies Committee meeting, the committee passed a motion that the G&P committee recommends to council that administration is to move the airport development process and guidelines to a special workshop, which is to include consultants HM Aero. The date of the workshop is to be scheduled by means of a doodle poll. Recommendation is that administration moves the airport development process and guidelines to a special workshop, which is to include consultants from HM Aero. The date of the workshop is to be scheduled by means of a doodle poll. I should also add that we will also attempt to get representatives from ISL to attend this virtually. HM Aero will be in attendance for this.
And just for clear, ISL is?
They were consultants that also worked on the development and guidelines for the airport area.
Okay. No, I think that was, the workshop we had with them was very informative and really good. And I think given that this works around our land use bylaws, it's gonna be a full day, I think, so. Any other discussion from council? Councilor Burrows?
I will make the motion that administration moves the airport development process and guidelines to a special workshop, which is to include consultants from HM Aero. Date of the workshop is to be scheduled by means of a doodle poll.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Councilor?
Go ahead.
Just wondering, did we want to add ISL?
Well, I was going to ask if we wanted to add the airport advisory group too.
Mr. Bashan?
Through the chair, I don't think there's a need to add ISL as they are a subcontractor for HM Aero.
Okay. Yeah, I like your idea of the advisory committee.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll friendly amend my own motion to include an invite to the members of the airport advisory committee be consulted on the doodle poll as well. In the workshop.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any, call the question, all in favor? And we'll get through 10.1 here. Correspondence, information items, anything anybody see or need to discuss? Or Councillor Williams?
I'll make a motion the council accept the correspondence information items as circulated.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any, call the question, all in favor? That one's carried. Does council want to take a 10-minute break? Before we get into the last part here?
Sure.
Okay, that it's just about 12, so come back 12:10, we'll reconvene. You just let us know we're offline. Okay, 12:10, we're back from our break. Just note that Councillor Burrows is not currently with us. He'll be in when he has a minute. I'll start with Councillor Williams.
I attended a few meetings in the last couple of weeks. One of them was the BARC Community Notification Network. So they had done a couple of crime prevention workshops in Barhead and Fort Assiniboine. That was all grant funded. They put on 2 of them, came in under budget and really well attended. So that's something they're going to look into a little bit more going forward. Lots of scam prevention and stuff like that, because that's getting very popular. We had an economic development committee meeting. That's a really fun group on there. I always enjoy those meetings. Went over quite a lot of things there. G&P, I attended that as well. And that's all the meetings that I went to in the last couple of weeks. Been pretty active with fires and stuff in the community. Lots of people have been reaching out to me the last little bit to see if Woodlands County can put a fire ban on. But I instruct them that's not our jurisdiction. We're in the green zone. That's forestry that does that. We don't have any say over it. So, but a lot of people are really concerned about fires right now. So, the notifications that we're putting on Facebook are like huge. I'm directing everyone to that website. It's so active on Facebook, and people are really appreciating that, the wildfire updates and the fire bans. So, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I would just want to kind of chime off what you're saying, just as part of my notes here too. Mr. Bichon, is there anything we can do to help, I guess, promote the province to, or I guess, get them to maybe up the advisory from advisory to a fire ban? Most of our neighboring municipalities are already there. I do know that it's provincially set, it's not us, but I'd rather be, if we can try to maybe get them to look at it a little bit differently, I'd rather be proactive this year than reactive with how dry it's been and the fires that have been popping up.
Your worship, will touch base with them.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments, Councillor Williams? I see any, Councillor Dean?
Just a few things that I was involved with over the last 10 days or so. Numerous people here, I attended the presentation by HM Aero on 17th, and as previously described, it was a very comprehensive education piece for all of us that attended. And then coming out of that, of course, we're going to follow through with a little deeper dive into the development process. And then on the 22nd, so Monday, I was at the Pembina Zone meeting. And one thing of note that I found interesting was a presentation by Fortis. And they talked about how they attempt to fireproof their grid with pole protection and various resistors and fuse alternatives. A lot of the practices or best practices are coming out of California with all the trouble they've had there. So it was a timely presentation as well. And that's it.
Any questions for Councillor Dean? Councillor Wilhelm?
So I've unfortunately been away working quite a bit, and I haven't got to go to much stuff since the last meeting. I did get to one Whitecourt Community Services meeting. Lots of great functions coming up in the Whitecourt area for Woodlands residents to participate in. I think there's a Women's Week coming up, a Youth Week. So there's lots of really great functions going on there that hopefully some of our residents will participate in as well, because they'll be well attended by the town residents. And other than that, I just wanted to say that the beginning of May, from the 5th to the 15th, I'll be on the East Coast working on a project. So I will be zooming in for meetings, or teamsing in for meetings when I can. Some of the days I'll be flying, so I won't be available, but I'll try my best to get to everyone that I can.
Thank you for I guess the update and also where you're going to be. Any questions for Councillor Wilhelm? Not seeing any. Getting to mine. Had Anselmo Egg meeting. Good meeting. Kind of talking about, I guess, where they're at and a bunch of things around the community. One of the things though that came out of it, I had a discussion with Heather, and I would like, I guess administration to look at when we get to our 2025 budgets, is kind of take an inventory on what we have for the podiums within our halls that are sponsored by the municipalities, have our logos on them. They are direct advertising for the county at these halls when they have events going on, but some of them are getting kind of rough. And like to maybe see if, take a look at the other halls that we have, where we have county supplied podiums. It's been a while, and we might have to budget for replacing a couple of them, would be nice. But again, that's, a 2025 budget. When we get to it, we get time. We had MPC meeting. We had a couple subdivisions we passed. The HMRO workshop was a really good workshop again. I thought there was a lot of information. It was very informative. And with some of the discussion with administration, it sounded like it might be something we try to roll out every election, maybe do something similar for new councillors to help gain a better understanding on where we are as far as with the airport within the municipality. And then that rolled into our GNP meeting after that. Next, only other thing I just kind of want to mention, discussion with administration, just so council knows. It's been a while since we've had a full encompassing kind of update on where our fire halls are and, levels of training and service and response times and what equipment we have and people. So I will be sending email off to Mr. Bichon later, and we'll see if we can get that at an upcoming council meeting, just for an update, so we can kind of see where we are. I think it's been about a year since we had one of those presentations from Sheldon. So, any questions, comments? Not seeing any. Councilor Willem.
I'll motion the council accepts the
Councilor Burrows just stepped back.
Oh, sorry.
Councilor Burrows first. Councilor Burrows.
Sorry, apologize for being late. Yeah, so I took part in the HMRO presentation as well. Excellent presentation, and I was really glad to be there for the information. I also went to an event called Risk Pro. So Risk Pro is an event that's put on by our insurer, which is RMA Insurance, and basically tells you some of the upcoming issues and ongoing issues that you're going to see from the insurance. Huge one was the amount of scams and things that you're seeing. Some of the municipalities were scammed to the tunes of $200,000 by hacking emails and actually saying, yeah, you just need to make this deposit to the supplier, and they would change the deposit information on the supplier email, and the financial officer would make that deposit and then go to the CAO, a couple days later and say, hey, I made that emergency deposit you wanted, and like, what are you talking about? That wasn't. So it's getting very sophisticated. We need to be aware of these kind of things and make sure that we have these checks and balances in place. AI, another huge threat on the horizon. And then I can update you for how many people were there? One. So we had the Zone 3 meeting as well for all the 13 municipalities in central Alberta. So that was on the Monday. And interesting presentations there, but the big one was the police funding model. So right now the province, and I sit on that board with the RMA, we've gotten a really good, we've had some really good conversations. We have a really good rapport with the RCMP. As a result of that, the RCMP has been fantastic. We're not sure where the province is on an Alberta provincial police. They have made some legislation changes. They've made some indications that they're going to move in one direction or the other, but there's nothing concrete. And there's also a discussion around the police funding model. So the example that I guess I can bring up is an RCMP station would have, let's say, 14 positions, and they're 14 full-time positions. So the amount of money that a municipality pays under the current police funding model would be for 14 positions. But the detachment may not be fully staffed. at that time, and often are not due to the shortages that they have in staffing. So you might end up with 10 positions that are there, but you're still being charged for the 13. So we're trying to have a conversation around how that actually affects the different municipalities and the police funding model. They haven't made the funding models up this year, and they are probably going to extend it until 2025. But there's also that huge retroactive pay raise that the RCMP received that, you know, the province doesn't want to pick up, the feds won't pick up, but the feds negotiated the raise in the process, and the province had no input in it, so we're kind of caught in the middle of that. So expect the police funding model to be an issue in the next year, so when we're going forward into the next budgets, wherever we are with the police requisition, I would bring it up by 50% in our budgeting process. So just, those are the things to be aware of. That's it for me, unless anyone has any questions.
Questions? No, not seeing any. We can get a motion to move the council reports. Rose?
I'll make a motion to move the council reports and questions as presented.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. We got nothing in 11.2, down to 11.3. Mr. Bouchon, the infrastructure report.
Your worship, members of council, the April capital and operating reports are attached for infrastructure. No big highlights other than in the capital. I have the Colmex application line item for $658,000 for May. That'll get changed to $200,000. And we are currently working with consultants on getting pricing on doing assessments on all the roads. That report should be available in time for the 2025 budget.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to Andre. With regards to the two larger projects that we have coming with West Mountain, East Mountain Road. The East Mountain Road line item I see here is just engineering and geotechnical. We're not doing any resurfacing on East Mountain Road this year.
Through Chair to Councilor Wilhelm, when I put that in, I meant to just, sorry. It's the engineering, the geotechnical, and the update I put underneath is that's what we're focusing on right now, but the intention is to resurface this year.
Okay, and then
Yes.
just to follow that up, thank you, because I was like, well, that's a lot of money for just engineering and geo. The geotechnical will be to mitigate the issues with the sloughing that occurs on the early section of the road off the highway, and then also further down past Range Road 120. They're going to put a plan in place for that stuff because I know it's an ongoing issue.
Through Chair to Councilor Wilhelm, the East Mountain portion only goes up to Range Road 120.
Okay.
So between 120 and 121, that won't be part of this project.
This year, okay. But we will fix that, hopefully, dip in the road as it is now.
It'll be reviewed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Councilor Wilhelm?
A motion that council accepts the 2024 infrastructure status report as information.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. Call the question. All in favor? It's carried. No financial report this time. Service tracker monthly report.
Reading council, before you is the service tracker report for March 2024. It's pretty average, nothing really surprising. Snow plowing and sanding, some culvert clearing, and 2 more kudos for our grader operators.
Anything there anybody want to discuss? Anything stand out? Councilor Dean?
Move that council accepts the March 2024 monthly service tracker report as in full.
Thank you very much. Call the question. All in favor? It's carried. Mr. Bouchon, CAO report.
Worship members of council, at the last council meeting, it was pointed out that there was one of the new Q400 water bombers at the airport. Now there are 2 sitting there. We are in conjunction with Protective Services and Communications. Administration will be rolling out a preparedness program for the wildfire season. That will be aired on the radio, identifying that residents can get further information on our website. So rather than wait until there's an issue, we can get ahead of the game and residents can start to prepare should something happen and they have to evacuate. On May 2nd, next Thursday, we are having staff training. All staff will be in attendance. We will have skeleton staff at the 2 offices, but the bulk of our staff will be taking training. Training, team building, half day locally here in Whitecourt. Update on the hiring. The Director of Finance is starting May 27th. The new Director of Infrastructure is starting next Monday, April 29th. The Planning Supervisor is starting May 6th. The Manager of Finance was posted, filled internally, and that vacant job description is being reviewed and will be posted. And as all council met our new community services and planning administrative assistant, so that person is on. That's it for my update.
Hey, any questions for Mr. Sean? Councillor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to Andre, you said the new infrastructure director is coming on Monday?
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct.
I just said, you know that issue out at Whispering Heights, I believe it's called, down Range Road 121 with the bus. Obviously you're acting CAO now, so I don't want to pull you out to look at that. Is there somebody in administration I can talk to just come there and have a discussion with it? Potentially look at some other solutions there? It's a lot of phone calls I get for that spot. So.
Through the chair, Councillor Wilhelm, I'm wearing both hats for another 11 days, so.
Okay, I'll bug you then.
Okay.
Any other questions for Andre? Councillor Williams?
I'll make a motion that council accepts the CAO report as information.
Thank you very much. Motion on the floor, call the question, all in favor? That's carried. Brings us down to our closed meeting. Item 12.2 on the agenda. Somebody wants to make a motion, Councillor Burrows.
I'll make a motion that we go into closed session for under FOIT 23 and 23 and 23.
With that, call the question, all in favor, going into closed session. It's carried. Hey, with that, it is 12:29. And okay, we're back at a closed session here. It's 12:44 now. Motion coming out, Councillor Wilhelm.
I'll motion to accept the ICF conversation as information.
Thank you. With that, call the question, all in favor? That's carried. And number 13, Councillor Wilhelm.
Motion to adjourn.
No discussion on that motion. Call the question, all in favor? And we are adjourned at 12:44.